A while ago I had the idea to cover the Hellraiser movies as, a whole, but I quickly did not want to do that. It was a matter of the series being very inaccessible for me, just a lot of the movies I just could not find on any streaming services, nor did I feel like really paying too much money for some of the movies, especially with the reputations that they have. On top of that, I am a person who thinks the original Hellraiser is, it's okay. Hellraiser, released in 1987 and was directed by Clive Barker, was pretty popular for how it weaved shades of love, eroticism, and pain throughout its story. My issue with this movie would be pacing and a few of the characters, like, boyfriend, and that beyond a few sequences near the beginning, the horror really loses itself near the end. The engineer. Dragon appears. That is not me discrediting this movie's achievements, though. In terms of practical effects, Hellraiser is among one of my favorite films from this era of horror. The entire reconstitution sequence has been gushed about for years, and for good reason. It's incredible. Not to mention the design of Pinhead and the other Cenobites. They look incredible here. The overall aesthetic and tone of the movie was just nailed right away here, and that bleeds perfectly into its sequel, Hellbound. Hellbound is an incredible follow-up to Hellraiser, and I think it's a much more solid movie altogether. The pacing and overall plotting of this movie are much more compelling than the original, even if at some points it feels a bit Nightmare on Elm Street-ish. But there are a lot of memorable sequences in this movie, and a lot of really great effects too. Not to mention, in my opinion, a far more improved villain, and also just the presentation too. Labyrinth-like Hellworld was striking to me, apart from the various sequences where they were running down hallways. I adored the presentation on the Leviathan especially. When watched back to back, I think Hellraiser 1 and 2 make a really solid movie overall. Hellraiser became popular. These two movies were followed by a sequel called Hell on Earth that is a fourth movie where Pinhead goes to space that I haven't seen, and then 6 straight-to-DVD sequels, which I have only seen a few of by now. One of them was Hellraiser Deader. I can't read that title. That took me a while to read that take without giggling. They fucking called this movie Hellraiser Deader. Deader. Deader than what? I literally just watched this movie with my boyfriend last night and I can't remember a thing from it. It is an unremarkable psychological horror movie that had the Pinhead shit inserted into it at the very last minute. I'm not even making that part up. The original script for this movie had nothing to do with Hellraiser. When they decided to give it the Hellraiser name, they rewrote parts of the script to then insert the Cenobites into it and make a character related to another character from another sequel. It sucked 1 out of 10. And the other one I've watched was Hellworld. I will comfortably say that both of these movies are equally as bad, but Hellworld was at least kind of funny. When Mark and I were struggling to pick out a movie, the second I read this movie's first word in the synopsis, him and I were set on it. Gamers who participate in an online role-playing game, MMORPG, are invited to a rave whose host plans to show them all the truth behind the Cenobite mythos. Yes, in this universe, Hellraiser just exists as a movie series, but also exists in the real world. A majority of this movie isn't real, and turns out to be people suffocating in coffins. There's a character in the movie named Derek who got his head cut off, but he died of an asthma attack. Oh, and this movie also just casually has Henry Cavill in it. Not good. I don't care if I said his name wrong, he dies. This is another movie where I can ultimately say that nothing happened. It was just these characters waiting to die, walking around this admittedly neat set, and maybe 1 or 2 good deaths, which weren't real. But there were moments in it that were definitely laughably bad, which made it more worth it. I think I'll be nice and give it a 1.5 out of 10. And the reason I wanted to make this video? Hellraiser 2022 was directed by David Bruckner. It was released to a mostly positive reception, though there were some mixed thoughts. And for me, it's my favorite in the series. I was not expecting that when I booted this up back in October, but it really was good. Damn good. And I really do think that this movie kickstarted my current phase with horror movies. It had been a while since I'd seen a horror movie that actually made my stomach churn. When a movie actively makes me feel miserable for the fate of the characters, that is something else. I am fearing for these characters, and that is something that I rarely get in movies. A lot of that is aided to the very strong performances from the entire cast. To me, this is the best acted Hellraiser. Every actor in this movie does a great job, especially Odessa Azon. Her performance as Riley just brings so much to this movie, and that's not to take away from the incredible side characters too. Though they may not get as much screen time as Riley, they still have enough to make you feel sympathetic for them. When Colin was endangered near the end of the movie, I did not want him to die. Like a legit edge of my seat feeling, you know? And the fate of Nora was so hard to watch. He may not have been the most present character in the movie, but since he was such a sweet person, it made it hard to stomach. A lot of this comes from the fact that they were written in such a human way. They felt realistic. And the story they decided to tell in this movie was compelling. I obviously don't want to go without mentioning Jamie Clayton as Pinhead, because she is phenomenal. My only issue with her is that I really wish there was more of her. A lot like Doug Bradley, she brings a really subdued, tense presence to the screen that I want to see more of. I thought the other Cenobites looked okay, just a bit too plasticky, but overall it doesn't take away from the designs. The effects and gore in this movie are really well done. It's just a great movie. I definitely feel comfortable giving it an 8 out of 10. And who knows, maybe one day I'll watch the other sequels and talk about those in depth.